This lecture on team play has two basic functions. The first, to introduce the basic coach to tactics and team play, and secondly, and perhaps more importantly, to introduce a common language or jargon into team play in Australian football. The fundamental object of team play is simply to outscore the opposition. It therefore involves scoring as many goals as possible and preventing the opposition from scoring. It therefore has an attacking and a defensive function. Success in team play is measured not by the statistics of number of kicks, marks, handballs or tackles, but by the score on the board at the final siren. Now, because of the size of the team, 20 players in Australian football, it's particularly important that we remember the adage, a champion team will beat a team of champions, and that the coach will remember to fit his players together so that each individual player's skills complement those of his teammates. Now, in this topic, we will consider the concept of team play under three headings: possession, percentage from possession, and defensive tactics. Possession is 9/10 of the law in Australian football. Successful teams are marked by an ability to gain possession, and importantly, to gain possession from the neutral ball. Now, this ball is the ball that is with the umpires, either from a bounce or a throw-in. It happens 60 or more times in a match, and therefore it's a particularly important phase of successful team play. Other areas of possession which are important from the individual's point of view are his abilities in a number of areas. Now let's look at these from these points of view. The first, his ability to read the play. Now this is something of an intangible skill, and many coaches debate as to whether or not you're born with this intangible skill to read the play. But it certainly involves three areas: a knowledge of your teammates' abilities, a knowledge of your opponent's abilities, and the predictability of the game. If we look just briefly at each of these. If you're playing in a position, it's important that you understand what your teammates about you can do. Can he turn each way? Can he handball both hands? Is he a short, a long kick? Does he turn onto his left foot when he's in trouble? Similarly, it's important that you have a knowledge of your opponent, of the opposition's ability. It's important also that you can read his play. This gives you the ability to prepare yourself in advance. And the third point, the predictability sense, the ability to predict perhaps one or two kicks in advance of the situation, what might occur. Now, perhaps an illustration of this is a player's ability to predict the bounce of the ball. And I think it's commonly understood that the drop kick, when it lands, hits the turf and runs on in a straight line. The drop punt does similarly. But I'm not so sure that even the best of players, a champion, can predict the bounce from the torpedo punt when it strikes the ground. Now, it's also important that a player be able to develop a style of play when gaining possession of meeting the ball in an efficient sense. It's important that he doesn't wait for the ball to come to him, that rather he goes to meet the ball. And when the ball's in the air, it's important that he meet the ball as high and as early in its path as possible. Similarly, in reading the play, he must learn to position online. And if I briefly demonstrate that when a ball comes to a player, we've all seen players who like to take the ball in one hand, here or there. But that's a risk. If that player can get online with a full-bodied approach, he will have a better chance of taking possession of the ball. Similarly, it's important that for his teammates about him, that he take one clean grab of the ball. You know the fumblers, the two grabbers, it's important that at training that the coach instill into his players this ability to take one clean grab of the ball, because many opportunities are lost when a teammate reads your ability, makes position, and then because you fumble, the play is lost. Similarly, the dispatch position. It's important that we develop, particularly into young players, the skill of always taking the ball in two hands, not holding it under one arm or the other, but in the dispatch position, because with reflex movement, he can handball either side or kick with either legs. And this is particularly important in the speed of the modern game, the dispatch position. Now, the more efficient that a player is at any of these skills, clean take, positioning on line, taking the ball in the dispatch position, the more time he will have when he takes possession of the ball to read the play further afield, to select the correct play or the play which will give his teammates the maximum advantage. And in this area, I'd like to look at a number of basic kicking plays. Now, these are particularly important, and whilst they may not be referred to specifically by coaches, it is important that we have terminology by which the coach can refer to them. Now, I'd like to demonstrate quickly on the blackboard what we mean by each of these plays. In the first one, the direct play, if we were to set up the position, imagine that the player in red has possession of the ball and wishes to kick to his teammate further afield, a teammate who is marked by an opponent. There are a number of ways with a controlled kick that we can maintain possession from this player to that. Certainly, one of them is with the direct pass. Not used as often in the game today because of the risk with stab passing or low kicks. Similarly, we can use a flighted direct pass, a slower controlled kick, a slow drop punt, a slow drop kick. And this is a particularly ineffective manner today by which we pass the ball from one teammate to another. The next pass is direct and over. Perhaps your teammate is a little closer and you are able to kick the ball over his head so that the ball lobs between him and goals and he runs in possession full face of goal. Another play would be to kick to space, to give him room to make position to elude his opponent. And the last kick, to kick to space and over, where you would attempt to kick to space and kick so that you gave him room once again to continue full face at goals. There we have a direct kick, direct and flighted, direct and over, and the space at sit and space at run. Now, similarly, such plays can be given terminology for the hand pass. It's able to give direct or give to position on the run. Now, point number 8 in reading the play, balance, square and steady. How often have you seen a player take possession, wheel out of the pack and take a short, quick kick to position or at goal? And what happens? The ball goes offline. The ball goes out of bounds. The maximum advantage is lost. Now, probably with a little talking from teammates, practice on the training field, practice within the match situation, when a player has confidence in his ability and in the teammates around him, he will know on those occasions when he has the time to balance, steady and square himself before delivering the ball. Now, another important point is that he learned to recover position. And this is that once the play has gone past him, that he is able to get back. And if he's a defensive player, that he would get back into position and that he would recover. Now, in summarising those points, let us look at the means by which a player takes advantage of possession. Firstly, to read the play. A ball coming into your area, the player must be encouraged to quickly read the play, to position, to take a clean take, maintain his balance, select the play, balance square and steady, control his placement, and then finally recover his position, go back to his position, and be ready to read the play on the next occasion. Now, let us move on to the second point in successful team play, that of percentage from possession. Statistics show that the team which has the most handballs and the most kicks does not always win. Now, whilst possession is essential, once gained, the ball must be maintained and used effectively if we're to gain maximum advantage from it. And one of the ways by which we can do this is play to the inside of the ground. And this diagram shows those areas of the ground where we do play to the inside. The outside of the ground where you don't get maximum advantage, the inside of the ground where you can. Now, obviously, if the ball can be moved up and down the centre of the ground, it is possible to score in the maximum number of occasions with the six-pointer. If we look at the next diagram, which shows the football key, we're able to see that that key exists on the inside of the ground and within 45 metres of the goal. And statistics of full forwards and forward players show that the maximum conversion is produced when the ball is shot for goal from that position, and in particular when the shot comes from a set kick, from a free kick or from an advantage play in that area. Now, the next diagram, another successful way of gaining percentage from possession is to teach players to create space. Now, this is a particularly difficult diagram to analyse, but it is possible here to see that if a player is in this original position and a teammate further afield, gains possession of the ball, it's important that the receiver of the ball creates space. In other words, he will give a dummy lead in this direction, drawing his opponent with him, and his teammate would sum up the situation and kick the ball to the created space. It's easy to say and very difficult to do, and even more difficult for a coach to set up training drills which will enable his players to instinctively create space. But circle work and constant freeze replays by the coach at training will enable this skill to be developed. Now, another way of gaining efficient movement of the ball, efficient use from possession, in a defensive sense, is by playing to the line. Now, just imagine if a team gains possession in the full-back area or full-back line, and they wish to transfer the play from one end of the ground to the other. Obviously, they would be loath to take the ball down the centre of the ground for fear that the opposition would regain possession and then have a set shot from the football key. And so what the player will do from the full-back line is kick to the line. Until the ball reaches the half-back line, he will kick to the line. Having maintained possession, he will then attempt to take the ball full face of goal, or kick, as some coaches say, to the point of the apex. Another means of gaining percentage from possession is by using set plays. Now, in this particular example we're going to show, imagine that a team is having difficulty scoring by attacking down the centre of the ground through the centre half forward and full forward. We're being beaten in those positions. Obviously, we'll have to attack via the flanks. And you can see in that diagram that it may be possible to attack to a winning forward pocket or a half forward flanker and then use a specialist kick, a kick that will only be used on 2 or 3 occasions in a game perhaps, but which will give you a little more opportunity of maximum conversion than a torpedo punt. And there we're referring to the banana ball for a right legger from the right forward pocket, and the check side or reverse punt kick from the right hand forward pocket. Another technique used there would be from the forward pocket or flank to centre the ball with a short play so that your teammate would be put in possession from within the football key. So much for percentage from possession. Let's move on now to the defensive side of the game. Now, we must appreciate and we must bring to the attention of players that you don't always win the ball. And in fact, on approximately 50% of the occasions, you will have to concede possession. Now, in doing so, it's particularly important that we bear in mind that our first aim is to win back the ball. If that can't be done, the second point is to force the opposition into a position where they can't gain maximum advantage from it. Now, the third position, of course, would be to put them under extreme pressure, so that they really are in difficulty. Now, I'd like to demonstrate on the board how you can set up your team play so that you do, having conceded possession, put maximum pressure on the opposition. Imagine that the players in red are attacking, and this player, a forward player, is marked by his opponent. Now, the defensive player would place himself on the inside of the ground between his opponent and the goals, so that if this player gains possession of the ball before he can get an effective kick at goal, he has either to elude or evade his opponent or run through him. And that's an important part, that defensive players play on the inside, or as may be called, on the check side of their opponents. When the player in red gains possession, the white opponent would attempt to force him to the boundary so that he gains the minimum advantage from the kick. Or, if he was, say, a left footer, you would force him onto his right foot so that he was unable to use the ball effectively. Now, that's the first point. Setting up your team play, your players, so that they play inside and in between their opponents and their goals. The next point, of course, regardless of where your opponent is, when he has possession, you chase. In junior football, on many occasions, he will stumble or drop the ball. In senior football, certainly by chasing, you're putting him under that little bit of pressure, which may reduce the effectiveness of his kick. It's important to block the ball off the boot and to tackle vigorously, but to tackle with control, with the aim, firstly, of dispossessing the ball carrier, of winning a free kick, or if not able to do those two, then holding the ball in that position, forcing a free kick. It's also important that regardless of the situation, regardless of the play, that a player keeps his feet, that he stays balanced and able to continue with the next play. It's important that once the ball has left his area, that he recovers position, that he goes back, and if he's a defensive player, that he makes position on the inside of his opponent. Now, let's move on now to team styles. How we put all of our team play together into a number of team styles, and I'm sure that you'll be able to recognise these with some of the modern day plays that are used today. I suppose that the simplest one of these is the man-to-man style, and certainly several VFL senior clubs use man-to-man style. It simply requires that every player on the field has a role. He has a job to do. He has a man to chase. And providing that the coach can define quite clearly the rules in regards who checks the players in the following division, the rucks, the rovers and the followers, he is able to effectively use the man-to-man team style. The second one, the pack method, and not a particularly good name for it perhaps, is the means of getting as many players to the fall of the ball as possible. Obviously, a team has to be superbly fit to play this game. It involves rovers, ruckmen and followers running the full length of the ground, chasing the ball to all areas and on all occasions trying to get the maximum number of your team players to the fall of the ball. Checkside tactics, as successfully employed here in South Australia. The checkside tactic, which I'll briefly show on the board, simply involves creating a situation where you have the maximum number of players on the defensive side of the ball. Imagine that this is the ball, and perhaps the ball for a throw-in, that you set up your players on the defensive or the check side of the ball. At the centre bounce, you would do similarly. You would set up your players on the check side, have your ruckman coming in from the wrong direction, and have your rover, follower, centreman, perhaps having your wingman, on the defensive side of the play. Now, once again, it's a system which very simply explains a technique to players. And that really is the essence of successful team play, to have a style of play which the players can understand. Now, the fourth method, the run-on team style, is the one that is currently being used. It's the one that has been introduced by teams such as North Melbourne, where once a team gains possession of the ball, they attempt to carry the ball from one end of the ground to the other with this run-on style. Players back up, overlap, and have great confidence in the ability of their teammate to gain possession and to move the ball fluently from one end of the ground to the other. Now, successful position play does involve certain basics: contesting, reading off hands, recovering position, and backing up. Each of these position play tactics are very, very important in successful teams. Now, in the last diagram that we'll look at, the basic line functions in successful team play. And if we look at these, you'll notice that, in point of fact, they are very similar. The full forward, half forward, the centre line, half back and full back lines each have similar roles. They all are required to contest the ball very strongly, to attack the ball. The forwards, of course, will be attempting to kick goals. The backman will be attempting to hold the ball in the area, recover possession if possible, and then set up plays further down the ground. It's extremely important that the team in possession of the ball today is able to carry the ball from one position to another with a controlled movement, that players are able to read the play and gain maximum from percentage. Now, I'd like to conclude with a quotation from a famous coach that I had the pleasure of playing under. And this was a coach who suggested to his players, and I would recommend that it's suggested to all players, that if you're the best on the ground, if you get 25 kicks and 5 handballs, you may control the ball for only 2 minutes of the 100. And this coach always said, what were you doing for the other 98 minutes? And that certainly highlights the importance of all of the points that are important in successful team play. Now, the coach's role with players of differing age levels will vary. Obviously, from 8 to 10 or 8 to 12, it will be important to introduce players to the game, to introduce them to very basic team play tactics. And of course, number one there will be how to gain possession. As players become a little older, it becomes even more important that they be able to carry out basic team plays. that they be able to centre the ball, that they instinctively hold the ball in a dispatch position, that they carry out the coach's instructions. Now this means that the coach is critical in understanding a lecture such as this and adjusting it to the needs of his players. The needs of the 10-year-old are very different to those of the 15, the 19 or the senior player. But remember and enforce the point made by the senior coach. If you're best on the ground, get 25 kicks and 5 handballs, you still only handle the ball for 2 minutes. What were you doing for the other 98 minutes?